Hey class, so sorry for the AV issues. I think that monitor is fixed now, but I'm going to show you what I had shown you before so that you can then begin working with Playmaker. So you want to start off with a scene where you have a terrain, a controller, and you can then move through it, which I have right here. Once you've done that, save that and back it up, because that's when you then want to install the Unity Playmaker package. So I have it right here. I'm going to double click it from outside, and then it's just like I was pulling something from the asset store. I click import, wait for the blue bars. Then I'll see this. The next thing you want to do is click install Playmaker, but it's going to do this check to make sure that it works with your version of Unity. If this is green up here, you're good, and you can then close that window. Then you go back to this Playmaker window. It would have updated. You click Install Playmaker again. Then you say, I made a backup. Make sure you did that. It's going to make some modifications to this project. I then click Import again. And you will then know that it has successfully installed when you see two things. One, after it goes through all this, you see the Playmaker menu up at the top, which I do see here. But you want to see the piece of text Playmaker Editor under there. So I'm just going to wait for this to install. You do have to give it some time. You can see it's really making a lot of changes in there. Do not cancel out of this. Actually, you can't. If you try to, it's going to take you right back there or mess up your project. Basically what Playmaker does is it's going to write the code for you to make things interactive. And that's why it's making so many modifications. Okay, so we're almost there. There we go. Okay, at this point then, if you can close that Playmaker window. If you click here, Playmaker, you see Playmaker Editor. And when you see that, then you can keep closing that. There will be this kind of floating window. You can take this tab, click it, and drag it somewhere. I like to put it over here where the console is. All right, and now we're ready to make some things interactive. So what we did in class, just with the blocks, is we've got first-person controller here, and I went up to Game Object, and I put in two cubes, so 3D Object Cube. Let's put another one in. You could use anything you want. It doesn't have to be just like this. And then gonna make a capsule. All right. And the last thing is I'm gonna make, in this case, a sphere that I'm gonna put over here. And then I'll move my controller so that I'm gonna approach the sphere. All right, so get it set up like that, and then you can see I'm gonna save. I'm paranoid of crashing. That's what I do, save a lot. And what we're gonna set this up to do is, as your controller approaches the sphere, it's going to trip. It's almost like a booby trap, but it's going to be something called a box collider. And once you go through the collider area, it will then trigger a change in state, so that the second state will be moving from basically to position 1, and then when you leave that trigger, it'll then move to position 2. And it'll be set up so as you approach the sphere, it'll move back to position 1. When you leave it, it'll go back to position 2. So how do we make that happen? Well, first we need to set up a collider around the sphere. So I've selected my sphere, and I'm going to then click on Add Component, and I type in Collider, Box Collider. So it's added one, and you then have to check this box that says Is Trigger. Very important. Okay. Next thing, if you look at that collider, you'll see it's right up next to the sphere. So let's give it some a little bit more distance. I'll just make it 5, 5, and 5. So now you can see there's this box around there. and you can check to make sure that it works correctly by going up to it. If you can walk through the sphere, it's set up correctly. And I just want to show you one thing. If you don't click that is trigger, that collider actually works as something that you collide with and you cannot pass. So you see that? I can't pass. Might as well have Gandalf there saying, "You shall not pass." So we want it to be a trigger. Okay, now we're ready to put our logic in. So here I have the sphere, and actually, well, I have capsule and sphere. Since the sphere with the collider is what is going to trigger all the actions, I put my logic on that. So first you want to select the sphere, and I'm just gonna, just to keep my sanity, I'm going to call that a control sphere because it's controlling everything. And then cube 1, I'm going to call that, I'm going to rename it position 1. And then the second cube, I'm going to call position 2. And then my capsule, I'm going to call, well, we'll keep that as capsule. Okay, so now we're ready to put our logic. And we select the sphere, okay? Make sure you don't select the wrong thing or you're going to have to redo all your logic. You cannot move logic from one object to another, unfortunately. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so we can see it bigger. All right. So I've selected the sphere. I then right-click to add the fixed state manager. And I see this. And the first state is going to be basically wait for trigger. Okay. Second state is going to be all about moving. And so I'm just setting these up so to give myself a sign of, or a reminder of what's going to happen in these states. You can almost think of the states as something like, I don't know, scenes in a play, right? So the first scene is really boring, the first state, it's just waiting for this trigger. And so you cannot connect these together until you have a transition event. So if you right-click that state and choose Add Transition and System Events, this is where you see all these different events that can happen. Mouse down is one that we could use, but I'm going to use Trigger Enter in this case. And then once I have that transition event, then I can click on it and I see the arrow and I can connect it to moving. Now if I go to moving, I can then add a transition here, which would be trigger exit. Okay, and you might think, oh, well, why am I putting that on moving? Because we want the trigger enter to let you move, and that's exactly what happens. Because you see, in this state, it's just waiting, and then only when there's a trigger enter event can it go to the next state, which is moving. And then if we want to go to moving back, only after you exit can it then go to moving back. So that's why sometimes people will, I don't know, put the trigger enter here and trigger exit here because they all line up, but you have to sort of think of the logic flow here. The last transition will be finished because we want this to be a loop so that it just continues to happen over and over, right? Okay, and so now even though I haven't made any interactivity, I just want to make sure my logic works. So I'm going to select the sphere and then you'll see these green boxes. When I then approach it, that's what I want to see. You see how it moved from trigger enter to moving. So trigger enter, moving, and then when I exit, it goes to moving back and then very quickly then goes to wait for trigger. So now we know the logic is good. And we can add our actions. So I'll go here, I click on, so trigger enter, I don't want an action on there because if I put an action on there, even though it's waiting, it's then going to then do something immediately before anything happens. So I actually want to put my action on moving. I click Action Browser. The action that we're going to use is iTween. So I-T-W-E-E-N, move to. There's a lot of other iTweens, but you want move to. And you can just double click that to then add it. And I'm not going to set it up yet because I'm going to add another iTween action to moving back. Okay. And now I can then say, well, what do I want to move? And so by default, it's going to move the owner. The owner means me as the first person controller. So I don't want it to move me. That'll be a really weird experience. I changed this game object to specify game object. And then I can then choose the object that I want and drag it over in there. You could also click this selector tool and find it. That's a little bit, I find that hard to find things with though. So here I'll go, capsule is what's going to move, right? And then transform position, if I click this grayed out area that says use variable, then I'll see transform position to game object. So I can then say position 1. I'm going to do the same thing over here on move back, specify game object. It's going to be capsule. And then transform position will be position 2. Okay, after I do this, now there you can see it moves and it moves back. So that's the basic tutorial that we went through. You should be able to set something up that looks like this. But for your assignment, you actually want to use something other than the objects you're seeing here. And I want you to, I'm going to give extra credit if you will do this. If you will add other actions. So let's say that you wanted a sound to go through or to play when it's moving. There's another audio play, something that you can, an action you could put on there. And with this, we want the audio to be on the capsule. So we'll choose the capsule. All right, and you would then actually here it'll tell you sometimes when you see this as game object requires audio source component. Components are what show up over here. So if you just click this, because it says click to add, you'll then see on the capsule it has added an audio source, and then here you can then specify an audio clip that you download. And then in the logic, you'll then want to say, basically choose that audio clip, the same one, and so you can make it do, like a swooshing sound. Let's say it's the whale. It could be, a whale sound, or whatever it is that you're going to be producing. So, add some audio in there if you can, and remember, you could also, let's say you wanted something else to happen that's not even on that capsule. You could add another action here and maybe make something else move, right? And it wouldn't have to be the capsule. You could choose whatever you want. So if you think about this, this is how you layer in a whole lot of movement and action that's triggered by different events. So hopefully that makes more sense than what was happening when we had the AV issues. And of course, you have some more time. So I'm going to stop the recording, put this in YouTube, and send it out to you. Enjoy the snow, too.